Hello guys, welcome back. So can someone please explain what exactly the Chicago Sky are doing right now? Because honestly, it's getting harder and harder to make sense of it. At this point, it feels like three things in life are guaranteed: death, taxes, and the Chicago Sky making a questionable front office decision. Seriously, it's almost predictable. Every offseason you wait, hoping maybe this time they'll take a different approach, and then somehow they surprise you in the worst possible way. Before we jump into it, real quick, if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure you like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. We're pushing hard toward the next subscriber milestone before the expansion draft, and every bit of support seriously helps. All right, let's talk about it. This morning, the Chicago Sky are getting absolutely roasted online after the latest trade news ahead of the expansion draft. And honestly, it's not hard to see why fans are frustrated. Last season, this team finished with a record of 10-34. That's not a small bump in the road. That's not one piece away. That's a team that was nowhere near playoff contention. The gap between them and the top teams in the league felt massive. But apparently, when the front office looked at that roster and that record, their conclusion wasn't, "We need major changes." Their conclusion was, "Let's protect everyone and run it back." Yes, you heard that right. Instead of letting the expansion teams potentially take a player and open up flexibility for the future, the Sky decided to send away second-round draft picks to both Portland and Toronto just to make sure none of their players get selected. Think about that for a second. A team that struggled all season long just used draft capital to make sure the exact same roster stays intact. Fans are sitting there scratching their heads, wondering what the long-term plan is supposed to be. Because when you're rebuilding, draft picks are usually the one thing you want to hold on to, not give away. And yet, the message from the front office seems pretty clear. They believe this group is closer to competing than the record suggests. But the reaction from fans and analysts has been brutal. Social media lit up almost immediately. People are asking why a team that finished near the bottom of the standings is so determined to keep every single piece together. Others are pointing out that expansion drafts are often opportunities for struggling teams to reset or reshape their roster. Instead, Chicago basically paid to keep things exactly the same. Now look, maybe the front office truly believes internal development will turn things around. Maybe they think the chemistry of the roster just needs more time. That's possible. But right now, to a lot of fans watching from the outside, it feels like the Sky just doubled down on a situation that already wasn't working. And that's why the criticism is pouring in today. Because when a team goes 10-34 and the response is, "Let's run it back," people are gonna have questions. A lot of damn questions. All right, everyone, let's talk about this situation for a minute. Because the more you look at what the Chicago Sky just did, the more confusing it becomes. So here's the reality. By the time the expansion draft is over, the Sky have already moved away multiple draft assets from this year's class. 2 picks are basically gone from their control. Now, yes, technically one of those moves was a pick swap, sliding down a few spots instead of losing the pick entirely, but they still gave up additional value just to make sure nobody from their roster gets selected. And that's where the questions start piling up. Because you can make the argument that second-round picks in the WNBA draft don't always turn into stars. That's fair. Plenty of players taken in that range never become long-term contributors. So if you want to say, well, the chances of someone at pick 26 being better than Maddie Westbeld or Haley Van Lith are low, that's a reasonable argument. But here's the problem with that logic. This particular draft actually has depth. There are players projected in the middle of the draft who have real upside. And when you're a team that finished near the bottom of the standings, upside should matter. Draft capital should matter. You should want as many chances as possible to find talent. Instead, the Sky looked at their roster and decided that protecting certain players was more important than keeping those chances. Let's talk about Maddie Westbeld for a second. Coming out of college, she was viewed as a pretty solid prospect. She had a strong career at Notre Dame and had the kind of versatility that made scouts think she could translate to the pro level. If she had declared earlier in her college career, there's a good chance she would have gone in the first round. But she stayed an extra year, dealt with some injuries along the way, and ultimately slid into the second round. That doesn't mean she can't develop into a good WNBA player, but it also doesn't mean she's a guaranteed long-term piece either. And yet, Chicago is acting like losing her in the expansion draft would have been a disaster. Same conversation applies to Hailey Van Lith. Van Lith is one of the most recognizable names coming out of college basketball recently. She's got the brand, she's got the personality, she absolutely moves merchandise and brings attention. But the basketball question is still there. What position is she going to play in the WNBA? Because at the college level, she handled the ball a lot, but that doesn't automatically mean she's a professional point guard. Running the offense in the WNBA is a completely different challenge. The speed, the defensive pressure, the physicality, all of it ramps up. If she's not a true point guard, then she's playing off the ball. And if she's playing off the ball, she has to prove she can consistently score against bigger and more athletic defenders. That's not guaranteed. So when you look at Chicago's decision to give up draft positioning and an additional pick just to make sure they keep Van Lith and Westbeld, it starts to feel like the front office is prioritizing familiarity over potential improvement. And that's the bigger issue. This was a team that won only 10 games last season. 10! When a team struggles that much, the normal response from most organizations is to look for ways to reset. You build through the draft, you accumulate assets, you take chances on young players who might develop into something bigger. Instead, Chicago's approach looks like the opposite. They're essentially saying, we like what we have, we just need to keep everyone together. But fans are looking at that roster and asking a very simple question. Why? Because if the roster wasn't competitive last year, why is keeping every piece of it the priority? Now, let's talk about another name that factors into this conversation, Ariel Atkins. Atkins is a very solid player. She's been known throughout her career as one of the better perimeter defenders in the league, and she can give you double-digit scoring on a nightly basis. But now there are conversations about potentially using a core designation on her, and that's where things get really interesting. The core designation is one of the most powerful tools a WNBA team has. It's basically a way to retain a player and prevent them from leaving in free agency. Teams usually reserve that move for true franchise cornerstones. So if Chicago ends up using that on Atkins, it raises even more questions about their long-term strategy, especially considering how the roster fits around their biggest star, Angel Reese. Reese is clearly one of the most important players in the franchise right now. She brings energy, rebounding, personality, and a massive fan base. She's one of the most recognizable young players in the league. But even there, things haven't felt completely stable. There have been moments that made people wonder about the direction of the team and the relationships within the roster. And when a team is already struggling on the court, those questions only get louder. So now you have a situation where the Sky are protecting players, giving away draft flexibility, and potentially doubling down on the same roster that finished near the bottom of the league. That's why fans and analysts are reacting the way they are. Because when a rebuilding team starts acting like it's already close to contention, people naturally start scratching their heads. And maybe the front office truly believes this group just needs more time. Maybe they think internal development will fix the problems. Maybe they see something behind the scenes that the outside world doesn't. That's always possible. But from the outside looking in, the strategy feels confusing, especially when there are intriguing prospects potentially available in the middle of this draft. Players who could bring new energy, new skills, and maybe even a higher ceiling than some of the players currently on the roster. So giving away opportunities to take those players just to keep everything exactly the same? That's a tough sell. And that's why the reaction around the league today has been so strong. Because right now, it feels like the Sky aren't rebuilding, they're just standing still. And in a league that keeps getting more competitive every single year, standing still might actually be the biggest risk of all. All right, let's just keep it real for a minute. Second-round picks in the WNBA draft? Let's stop pretending they're some kind of gold mine. They're not. Most of the time, they're not even close. So if the Chicago Sky are sitting there saying, you know what, we'd rather keep Maddie Westbeld than a second-round pick, then honestly, what does that say about the talent hanging around in that part of the draft? Let's be honest, a lot of that second round is straight-up garbage. Now, before people start losing their minds, just think about how this usually works. The top few picks? Yeah, those matter. There's real talent there. The first 3 or 4 players can change a franchise. After that, you've still got some decent players through the rest of the first round, but once you hit the second round, the drop-off is brutal. Most of those players aren't even sticking in the league long-term. Half of them are heading overseas the minute the season ends, Europe, Turkey, wherever they can get minutes and a paycheck. That's just the reality of the league right now. So when Chicago says they'd rather hold on to Hailey Van Lith than gamble on a second-round pick, I mean, I get the logic. At least Van Lith is a known name. At least she moves jerseys and brings some attention. But here's the other side of the coin. The Chicago Sky themselves are kind of a mess right now. Let's not sugarcoat it. The roster isn't great, the direction feels all over the place, and the front office decisions lately have been questionable as hell. And somehow, they're still acting like they're protecting some kind of elite roster. Like, relax. Nobody was lining up to steal half this team anyway. Meanwhile, Angel Reese is just sitting there in the middle of all this chaos, probably wondering what the hell this franchise is actually trying to build. So yeah, maybe the second round isn't loaded with stars. Maybe most of those picks don't become anything. But when your team is already struggling, giving away draft assets just to keep the same damn roster together, that's the kind of move that makes fans shake their heads. Anyway, that's my take. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hype it up for the algorithm. I appreciate you all watching.